Lenny, why don't you take 30 seconds and just introduce yourself a little bit, tell them about Come Reason Ministries and what you do.
Yeah. So this is what I do. What I do is apologetics, which is a fancy word for defending the faith. I take issues of religion, morality, ethics, reason, culture, and I say, here's what Christianity believes. Here's why we believe it. There are reasons to believe the things that we believe. And I help you guys by equipping you to explain these things so that you can then turn around and better explain them to other people. I've been doing this for probably 20 years now. I started off online, believe it or not, way back when the internet was just in its infancy. So 1995, yeah, it was amazing. You had to. I tell people, you guys don't know. You'd get up in the morning, you'd turn on your computer, you'd press check email, and you'd go and you'd take a shower, and you'd come back to see if you had any email. It was dial-up connections, and it was amazing. Anyway, but that's where I started. So I've been doing this for a while, but I love it, and I love helping you guys. And what you'll find is you'll have a whole lot more confidence in your faith because you can see that there are some really, really smart people, the smartest people in the world, have already thought about most of these questions and problems that you're dealing with. Yeah. And there's answers out there, and you don't have to be afraid.
That's good. Just to kind of echo what he said, I hope you guys understand tonight, it's important to know why we believe what we believe. And that's what Lenny has devoted himself to, studying that out and sharing it with others. So I'm hoping this is going to be a benefit to you guys. Lenny, let's do some rapid-fire lightning round questions.
Round questions. We'll see how fast we can go.
Get to know you
yeah,
tonight.
Okay, fair enough.
So first thing that pops in your head, honest answers.
Okay.
Okay? All
fair
right.
Enough.
Ready? Favorite soda?
Coke.
Favorite burger joint?
In-N-Out.
Favorite sit-down restaurant?
Ooh, sit-down restaurant. Probably Market Broiler Fish Place.
Okay. Favorite place to visit outside of California?
New York.
Favorite car?
I like my truck.
Okay. Order from Starbucks.
Oh, I get a skinny vanilla latte.
Skinny vanilla latte, okay. Very good. All right, give it up for Lenny real quick. Come on. So let's jump right into it. So like I said, these are some questions concerning God, concerning the Bible, concerning our faith, but also concerning culture today, some struggles that you guys face on a regular basis. And once again, these are some questions that were submitted, so we're hoping to shed some light on these topics today. Lenny, first up, how can we know that the Bible is trustworthy? How can we know that the Bible is true?
Wow. Now that seems to be a simple question, but there's actually two questions in there. Yeah. Because there's a question of how do we know that the text that we have is the same one that the apostles actually wrote and the authors. Then there's the question of, but how do we know that the contents of that text is reliable in the things that it claims, right? So the first one is a matter of fact. How do we know that what we've got is what they originally wrote? The second one is how do we know that what they wrote was true? Those two different things, or from God. So the first one is easy, and I'll give you an example. I'm Italian by heritage. Okay. My great-grandparents came over from Sicily, and as a matter of fact, it was cool. I got to go to Ellis Island and look up the ship manifest, saw where they signed their name, the whole bit. It was really cool. Well, my great-grandmother brought her sauce recipe with her, right? And she taught it to her 3 daughters, one of which was my grandmother. My grandmother then, of course, taught it to her kids, one of which was my mother, and my mother then taught it to my wife. And so now my mother was one of 4, and the 4 kids had 16 grandkids there, and there was, of course, family upon family upon. Now imagine 80 years from now we come together at a family reunion, and everybody brings their spaghetti sauce, right? And somebody says, you know what? Some of them, there's some differences here. How do we know which one was the original? How can we figure this out? Well, if you have a whole bunch of them, it actually starts to become real easy. We say, okay, everybody write down your spaghetti sauce recipe. And you start looking at them. And you say, well, the ones from my grandmother's era, the people who are still living there, they're a little closer to the original. Chances are they didn't change nearly as much as the later ones. Okay. You see these ones over here say you add sugar to it, but gee, that's Uncle George. He's always had a sweet tooth, and those are all his kids. None of the rest say sugar, so sugar's probably not true. This one is missing parsley, but all the rest of them have parsley. Parsley is probably, right? So the more copies that you have, the more you can accurately start to deduce what the original was. You start to filter it back, and you make these logical deductions from it. Well, this is what we have with the New Testament. The New Testament, we have over 5,000 manuscripts between the first 400 years of their existence, some going all the way back to the doorstep of the first century. We've got over 25,000 partials, scraps, and then we've got a whole bunch of quotes from the early church fathers who were quoting. They're not direct copies of the New Testament, but we have quotes. When you put all that stuff together, we can, with 99.5% accuracy, reconstruct the New Testament exactly as the original apostles wrote it. There are only 17 verses in the entire New Testament that are in any doubt whatsoever, and this is true from New Testament scholars who don't believe the Bible. There are guys who actually studied the New Testament who are atheists, believe it or not. But they hold to this same idea. Bart Ehrman is one of these guys. So the 17 verses that are in doubt, and they're all marked in your Bible. You'll see that they're in little brackets usually. John 7:58 to 8:10 is one of those. But they're marked in there. But none of them make any difference in terms of content, in terms of what the Bible teaches. So we have very good evidence that the Bible that we have today is the same as the Bible that was written by the apostles. Now, some people say, what about all the translations? What about all the translations? How many times has the Bible been translated? Anybody want to guess? Okay, the Bible in your laps, how many times has it been translated? Once. Once. From the original manuscripts to you. It's not the game of telephone. That's a myth. It's not, it doesn't go through permutation. They always go all the way back to the originals, translate it one time to you. And today, like I said, we have older and better manuscripts than we even had 200 years ago. So we've got the best copies. So the Bible is true in the sense that we know what the apostles wrote. We know what Now, is it from God? Second question. And I can say yes, for two reasons. First of all, the Bible has apostolic authority, and this is what Jesus said, that the apostles who learned from Jesus, right? Jesus authenticated the Bible. He said from the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, everything in the Old Testament is going to be fulfilled. He also said that I will give you the Holy Spirit in John chapter 14, 15, 16. And he said, he will bring to your mind remembrance of all these things. He will teach you these things. He will enlighten you in these things. And you, the apostles, are the foundation upon which I'm going to build my church. These are the things that you're supposed to pass on to others. And Jesus said, I'm going to prove that I can teach you, that the words that I'm teaching you and that are authoritative by dying and rising again. See, and he's the only guy who ever did that. That's what the Jewish leaders asked him in John chapter 2, remember? He says, destroy this temple and in 3 years I will rebuild it. Why did he say that? They said, what authority do you have doing all this stuff? He said, destroy this temple and in 3 days I will rebuild it. It took us 46 years to build this temple. But he was speaking of the temple of his body. The resurrection is his proof text that what he claims is true. So this is why Paul says all scripture is given by inspiration of God. Jesus proved that he could speak on God's behalf by rising again. That gives him the authority to sanction the writings of the Bible. And we have predictive prophecy in the Bible, and only God can offer predictive prophecy. We have predictive prophecy in the Old Testament. We have predictive prophecy in the New Testament, right? Jesus said, you like the temple so much, I'm telling you not one stone will be left upon another. All will be thrown down. That happened. Matter of fact, I was in Israel just a couple of months ago, and I saw the wreckage. In 70 AD, the Romans came in, burned the temple to the ground, right? And all the gold that they used started melting between the cracks of the stones. So guess what the greedy Romans did? They took crowbars and things and moved the stones off of each other so they could grab all of the stuff, and not one stone was left upon another. And this was well after Jesus had died. So Jesus predicted that before he ascended into heaven. So the fact that there's predictive prophecy means that we can rely on the Bible as God's word, because only the Bible can do that.
That's good. That's good. Some great insight there. Next question. Did God establish morals, or were there morals before God?
Yeah, the old euthyphro dilemma. This is a famous argument in Greek philosophy. Basically, it goes something like this. If God is all-powerful, well, no, that's a Humean argument. If either God establishes morality by just claiming something, right? I say it's moral to do X, Y, and Z, so therefore it's X, Y, and Z. Or morality exists and God recognizes it, but then why do you need God? So if God is just claiming morality, isn't that arbitrary? God could say it's moral to slap your brother. You know, people with brothers I can hear, right? Everybody, if it's my younger brother, that's cool. If it's my older brother, it's not. No. But the problem is that's not the way morality works. Morality is actually part of God's nature. So God neither arbitrarily just chooses things that are moral, nor does morality exist somewhere outside of him. Morality is part of his nature itself. And morality is what you would call grounded in God. Now, what do I mean by that? And it's a little complex, but let me kind of tease it out for you. We're human beings, so we think in a certain way. One of the ways we think is we think via language. When you have ideas, even when you're thinking to yourself and not saying anything, when you're hungry, your mind naturally thinks, boy, I'm hungry. It kind of thinks those words. That's because language is a natural part of who we are. Language doesn't sit outside of humanity. If there was no humanity to speak English, then English wouldn't exist. But also, humanity doesn't merely invent language. Language is kind of part of our makeup because it's how our minds work. In the same way, morality is part of how God's mind works. And so when we do the things that God would have us do, those are called moral things. Those are called things that we should be doing. When we do things that God would not have us do, those are immoral things. And it's just that simple. So morality is grounded in God. The same way beauty is grounded in God. And we don't think about that. Beauty can be as objective as morality. And so did you ever think that people, what? Beauty is objective? Yeah. I mean, think about it. Have you ever seen a beautiful sunset? Or have you ever been to the edge of the Grand Canyon? Nobody says, oh, that's ugly. Nobody. They may say, hey, man, I'm not in a good place right now. I can't really appreciate it. But nobody says, no, that's not beautiful. There is an objective idea of beauty, just like there's an objective idea of morality, both of which are rooted in the nature of God.
That's good. That's good. This next question is speaking a little more practically, dealing with some situations I know that many students in here deal with on a regular basis. But this question is written, I have friends that are gay or bisexual. How can I show them the love of God, but also be open and honest about my beliefs?
Okay. Good question. And it's a tough one these days. There's a lot of this difficulty that Christians face. First of all, you can show your friends the love of God without mentioning sexuality at all.
That's good.
Okay, here's my thing. These are people, right? Yeah. What their physical attraction to another person is what any person's physical attraction to another person is one very small part of who they are as an individual. They have parents and relationships that are non-sexual, that they care about. They have worries about classes and tests that press on them the way worries about classes and tests press on you. They have feelings of inadequacy, like everyone does. And it's strange that many people who come from the LGBT community make this their defining characteristic. And my first response is, I believe all human beings are made in the image of God. And every human being in some aspect reflects that image. Now, some people reflect it more than others. Some people try to bury that more than others. But why should I take that one little aspect and make that the only aspect of your character that I care about? That doesn't make sense to me. Now, we can talk about whether homosexual attraction is right or wrong. And I can say, well, physically, when we look at how people are built, homosexual relationships don't make sense, right? You can look at a thing and understand by how it's built, ways it functions and way it doesn't function. If you look at a car, and anybody knows anything about cars, there's a little spark plug that causes a little explosion that drives the car, right? Those spark plugs and that little gas and that explosion means that a car can't operate underwater. You can just look at a car and see it can't operate underwater. Similarly, you can look at the human anatomy and see that human anatomy is built in a certain way, right? Matter of fact, reproductive organs only do their function if males and females are coupled together. What's the function of reproductive organs? To make babies. That's its primary goal. That's the primary purpose of reproductive organs. That can only happen with one kind of coupling. So, homosexual coupling is not using those biological components in the proper way. But again, if you're asking how do I reach my friend who identifies in such a manner, my first response would be, tell them that as a person, I love you, I care about you, let's talk about some of these other issues. And guess what? Jesus Christ can help you with the pressures of your life. Jesus Christ can help you with your relationships with your parents, or whatever the case may be. But that doesn't have to be the defining feature of your relationship. It is Jesus loved the woman at the well before she repented of her sexual sin. Right? I tell you, you have 5 husbands, and the one you're married to, the one you're with now, really isn't even your husband, and you're sleeping around. But he still went out of his way to go and talk to her.
Yeah, so definitely. No, that's some great insight. Next, what are some ways that I can use my faith to encourage my friends that may be dealing with suicidal thoughts?
Wow, suicide. Suicide's a tough one. I think, and we've lost this idea of the intrinsic value of, what does intrinsic value mean? It means you have value just because of the kind of thing you are. There are certain things that are right. So we place value on money, but money doesn't have intrinsic value. It's paper and ink. You know, if we were living in another age, maybe we would place value on seashells. I don't know. You know, some guys have used, in prison, they use cigarettes as currency, as an example. And that becomes a source of value. That's extrinsic value. That's value that we impose upon things. But human beings are not like that. They have value simply because we're people, right? There's human dignity. There's dignity in being a human being for each one of us. How many of you believe that there's dignity in being human? How many of you believe that dignity is important for each one of us? So a person who's thinking about committing suicide, you have to reach out to them, and first of all, you have to say, hey, you're valuable. You're valuable. The person who's in a catatonic state, in a vegetative state in the hospital, is valuable because he's a human being and he bears God's image. So you have to reach out to them and tell them that they're valuable. Tell them that losing that individual does make a hole in the world. you've lost something that can never be replaced because nobody is put together in exactly the same way. And then secondly, if someone who's contemplating suicide, you really need to tell someone in authority. Yeah. Because many times they need more help than they can overcome these feelings themselves. That's key. Yeah. But you want to talk to them. I always say suicide strikes at yourself, but it hurts everyone else. Yeah. Because everyone else is sitting there wondering, what did I do wrong to make this person, right? So you're actually not solving the problem by committing suicide. You're wounding all those people around you. And I think that's a big piece too. So you want to embrace the person, love the person, but you also have to tell someone.
That's so good. That's so good. Moving on to the next question. Why does God allow bad things to happen?
Why does God allow bad? Okay. Well, this is the old problem of evil. Why would God create Satan? Why would God allow evil to exist at all? Why couldn't he create a perfectly good world? Well, let me give you a story. I used to travel a lot. I go and speak places. And there was a point where I was on a plane 2-3 times a month. I was gone a lot. And sometimes I'd like to take my family with me. And my kids, they were pretty young at the time, they come up to me and say, "Dad, we want a dog." I'm like, "Oh, no. Not a dog." Now, I love dogs. Don't get me wrong. How many of you are dog people? How many of you are cat people? See, I believe cats are the reason they invented a catapult. No, I'm serious. I'm sorry. I love dogs, but I knew what was going to happen if we got a dog. Who's going to feed the dog? It's going to be me. Who's going to water the dog? It's going to be me. What about when the dog's a puppy and chewing things up, or he leaves a little present on the carpet there? Who's going to clean that up? That's going to be me. We want a dog. So one day I came home, and I had found this great little mechanical dog, Sparky. I could have brought him. I should have brought him.
Yeah, you should have.
But it's great because I said, "Kids, I got you your dog." And I set it on the ground, and I flipped the switch, and Sparky does this. He starts walking. He goes, "Zh, zh, 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 zh." And, "Heh, heh, heh." Wags his tail, does a backflip, and does it again. Zh, 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 zh. Heh, right? He said, "This is the perfect dog. Comes when you want him to, speaks, wags his tail when you come home, soft to the touch, does tricks, doesn't eat anything, doesn't leave little nuts and bolts on the carpet that you have to pick up. This is the perfect dog." I had 3 kids going. We have 2 dogs. Why didn't Sparky satisfy my kids? Why not? Because he's a robot. And what can't Sparky do? Huh? He can't love you, can he? He can just run on a program. In order for us to get a dog that can show love, we also have to get a dog who can poop on the carpet. God wanted to create people with the ability to love him. If you don't have the ability to love, then you're just a robot. But if you do have the ability to love, then you have the ability to disobey, to not love, to poop on the carpet, so to speak. And guess what happens? That means that evil can exist. In order for love to exist, evil, the ability to not love, has to exist. So when God created people, he did so understanding that there's going to be a period of time where there's going to be some evil in the world. Now, God keeps his hands on the thermostat, and our hope as Christians, when we talk about the hope of Christ, we know that one day all the evil will be vanquished, and we will be with God forever. And as Paul says, the sufferings of this present age are not worthy to be compared to the glories that we will see in the future. So God allows the puppy stage, the evil that exists with us, right now. And sometimes I don't want to downplay it. Sometimes it's ugly. But it's necessary for a great love. You're going to sometimes have greater evil. Ultimately, love wins, and that's the key.
That's awesome. That's a great point. Our final question this afternoon is, I think this is prevalent in a lot of people's situation, just because it's so adamant in our culture nowadays. But what's the problem with gender neutrality?
Yeah, gender neutrality. That's become the new thing, isn't it? And it's become the new thing really quickly. I mean, some of you guys are just coming into this because you're junior high and all, but 10 years ago, this wasn't a talking point. This wasn't a thing. Now, okay, I'm going to make a distinction. I want to separate the idea of gender dysphoria, people who are really kind of confused about what that means, with gender neutrality and a lot of the political things. First of all, the concept of gender itself. What is gender? How many of you have taken Spanish or speak Spanish? Okay. Gender is what Spanish nouns have. People are not gendered. People are sexed. And there's a difference there. But our culture has adopted this concept of gender, and I think it's confused. So let's tease this out. If you're a girl, does that mean you can't play baseball? You guys don't seem too sure about that. Come on, where are the ladies? No, you can't tell. Or you can't play with trucks. We were in the green room, right? And your niece has a little car. She's what? How old is she? 2. She's 2, and she's playing. Oh, she's a girl. She can't play with cars. Is that right? No. Does that mean she's not a girl if she's playing with cars? Okay. Can girls wear pants? Can guys have long hair? So we haven't strayed from sex yet. So what does gender do for a human being that sex doesn't? Because it doesn't matter what sex you are, right? You can do what you want to do. So what's gender all about then? If you choose to identify as this gender, does that mean that as identifying with this gender, then you have to wear dresses, then you have to act a certain way, then you have to behave? No, that doesn't make any sense, because we've already established that male or female doesn't depend on actions, it depends on biology. Oh, and by the way, there are only 2 sexes. There are only 2 gametes, right? If you've gone through biology class, you know that there's a male. Guys know what a gamete is? It's the thing that creates life. So there's the sperm and there's the egg. Those are the 2 gametes that a human being comes from. And there are only 2. There's no third thing. In order for you to get a new human being, you have to put the 2 together. That's what sex is, male and female. There's no third thing. So when we talk about human beings, we talk about sex, because that's how our physiology works. Now, there's a certain level of respect then, because we are not only sexed beings, but we are also sexual beings, and which means that there's an attraction. Again, biology, naturally, for the most part, we're attracted to the opposite sex. So there also needs to be a respect for and a privacy of each sex in certain conditions, so that people can feel safe, so that people can feel not exposed, violated. One of the more hideous things I've seen in many different instances of people who are either in prisons or concentration camps or whatever is they strip them, they take off all their clothes, and that's humiliating. Even individuals who are in the last stages of life, who need help with their bathroom duties and their bodily functions, it's more comfortable for them to have an individual help them who's a professional, who's not, say, a family member or something like this, because there's an inherent dignity that you have in your own body that you don't want to necessarily share with the outside world. Okay? So what we do and what we've always done as a society is we've recognized that there's a dignity, and so we've put up certain barriers. Men change with men, women change with women. Because there's a biology attached to that, and there's a dignity in what your body is made up of. You are just as dignified no matter which sex you find yourself in, no matter which sex you're born in. You are dignified in your biology. There's things that you can do that another individual of the opposite sex cannot do, and that's true both ways. Don't ever let anybody tell you that there's no dignity in the sex that you have. That's not true. But because of that, we need to protect that. Yeah. Anything that's valuable can't be treated as something that doesn't matter, right? And that's what a lot of this push is. There's a guy in Canada right now person who identifies, quote unquote, as female, who's never gone through any surgeries or anything. And what his shtick is he goes around to women's salons and he tries to get them to wax his genitals, and then he sues them when they don't. Now, there's a lot of problems with this. But again, this is someone using, quote unquote, gender neutrality as a club to try and upend the understanding and the inherent dignity of the separation of sexes. So my first question with gender neutrality is, what does gender do that sex, doesn't? Or why should we worry about gender if we're all equal anyway? And then secondly, there is a dignity to each one of our sex. Now, again, there are those people who are a little confused, who maybe don't feel comfortable in their bodies. I understand that. That's not something that's surprising. That's not even common to merely identities of, say, boys and girls. There's a whole separate section of folks that suffer from a thing called BIID. Anybody heard of BIID? Body Identity Integration Disorder. And you may have seen this if you watch medical shows on TV. This is one of the things that people love to pull off because it's actually pretty outrageous, but it's true. There are people who feel that their leg shouldn't belong to them, or that their arm is foreign. And many times they try to amputate their own arm because they just feel like it doesn't belong. Now, people have and you can look at some of the different shows that talk about this, body identity integration disorder. But doctors have seen this and they recognize, well, this is a problem because it is your arm, obviously. It's nobody else's. And we need to work with you to overcome these feelings. So I'm not doubting that the feelings aren't real there, but there's a problem so if you're looking at other parts of your body and saying that they don't belong and you want to chop them off, it seems to me that's a similar kind of a problem, and we need to deal with it in a similar kind of a way. But it's popular today to just say, because I feel this way, therefore it's true. And that's where the big mistake is. Let me tell you guys something. Truth is important. That's right. And there is only one kind of truth. There's not a true for you and a true for me. There is true truth. So when we talk about what's true, when we talk about Jesus rising from the dead being true, I mean it's true in the same way that the earth is 93 million miles from the sun. Think about that. Jesus rising from the dead, that statement is as true as the earth is 93 million miles away from the sun, or 2 + 2 = 4. That's truth. Truth is immovable. Yeah. It's how things work in the world. Look, I can say, I don't believe that the batteries run out on my cell phone. I just don't believe it. But if I try to send a text and the screen still stays black, doesn't matter what I feel, does it? Right? Yeah. How many of you have been there? I know my phone is charged. I believe it. Oh. Mom, you have the charger. Where's the cord? Doesn't matter what you believe. What's the facts of the matter? That's the issue. We have bought into an idea that feelings somehow trump the outside world, and that's just not the case. Truth is how things correspond to what is really out there. So it is true that there are two sexes. It is true that each one of you has human dignity, that you reflect the image of God, and it is true that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. And all of those things are as true as 2 + 2 = 4. Now, there are good reasons we can talk about those kinds of things. But I want that, at least, if nothing else, to get through. Christianity is not a faith based on faith itself. It is a faith based on the fact of the resurrection. And this is what Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 15. He says, if Jesus wasn't raised from the dead, let me tell you guys, you're of all people to be most pitied because you've believed a lie. Matter of fact, God should probably squish us first because we're lying about God. He says, you can hang all of Christianity on one thread. That thread is the resurrection. That's it. Luckily, that thread we have is made out of adamantium. You can't cut it. You can't break it. You can't budge it. It's true, so therefore it doesn't go away. And that's the key in all of this, is to remember that.
That's so good. Can we put our hands together for Lenny? Thank you for coming out today and joining us. Real quick, one more thing that I wanted to mention before you go. Coming up, I believe it's in October.
Yep, it's in October. One of the things that we do is to help you guys learn to talk about issues of faith with people who maybe don't hold to your belief system. And one of the ways we do this is we take you kind of out of your comfort zone. We put you in, it's kind of like, you know how a missionary, you get comfortable doing certain things, but then you go off to a foreign country and you see how they think completely differently about life, and wow, that's interesting. Okay, we do the same thing, but we pick you up and drop you off in a place that's completely different in terms of worldview. So what I do is I take a group of kids and I train them, and we go up to Berkeley, California, and we go and we talk about God to atheists. And we have atheists come in. Now, this sounds, right? Oh, my gosh. It's not scary. Matter of fact, most of the conversations I have, the atheists thank us afterwards because we don't actually push anything on them. We start asking them questions about their faith. And what you'll find is they don't know what they believe either. All of a sudden, they're like, what? So you can ask them things like, well, do you believe in God or a higher power? No. Do you believe there's such a thing as absolute right and wrong? Well, of course not. Do you believe there is a problem plaguing all of humanity? Oh, yeah. Believe me, everybody in Berkeley has an answer to this question. Yeah, the climate change, or the 1%ers, or the subjugation of women, or the race issues, or whatever the case may be. There's always an answer. And then you could say, wait a minute, if there's no absolute right and wrong, how is it that that problem applies to everyone? Can you help me understand this? And all of a sudden they're going, let me think. I'm not sure. I'll tell you a quick story. I had a Jehovah's Witness guy come to my door, right? And we started talking, and I said, let me ask you a question. You must hear a lot of reasons why people believe the different things that they believe, right? He goes, I hear all kinds of reasons. I mean, you hear them like, well, my parents raised me that way, so I have to believe that. Or, well, this has really worked for me in the past. Or, well, I'm an American, so I have, or whatever the case may be. He goes, I've heard all those and more. I said, can we agree that those are terrible reasons to believe something? Well, what do you mean? I said, well, there's only one good reason to believe anything. What's that? Well, if it's true. The only reason you should believe anything is if it's true. And it doesn't matter if the belief is dangerous or not, right? We teach our kids even things that aren't necessarily dangerous. Santa. Do we love Santa? You got some proof that there's Santa, right? I mean, the cookies are eaten, the milk's drunk, there's presents on the floor. That's some empirical evidence I got to work with here, you know. Okay, let me ask you a question. Would you want to sit on a 5-hour plane flight next to a 40-year-old man who's believing in Santa Claus and wants to talk about him? You scare me. Okay. No, we don't want. Why? Not because the belief is dangerous, but because it's not true. He's deluding himself. So I'm telling this to my friend, and I say, so can we agree that we should only believe on something that's, yes, absolutely, and this is why I'm part of the Jehovah's Witnesses. He goes on. I said, well, you know, I've studied the Watchtower a little bit, and I know that your leaders have made certain predictions. They've interpreted the Bible in a specific way. They've said that Jesus was going to come back in 1874, then 1914, then 1918, then 1925, then 19... Well, you've got to understand that they're just men and they can be fallible. Okay, fine. I'm not going to argue that point with you. I agree with you on that. They're just men and they can be fallible. However, they've also said something else. They said that Jesus wasn't the second person of the Trinity, but he is a created being, an archangel called Michael. That's what they teach. This is something that's key to salvation, understanding who Jesus is. What if they're wrong on that like they were wrong on this stuff? Well, I don't think they're going to be wrong on it. But what if they are? Now we're talking about something that really matters. And you've already admitted that they could be wrong on stuff. They're just men. But I don't think so. What if I can show you from the Bible that they're wrong? Would you believe? You know what he told me? He says, well, I've been a Jehovah's Witness for 17 years. It's given me the most fulfillment in my life, the most meaning. And I said, wait a minute, didn't we just agree that's a bad reason to believe something? And he went, and he thought I tricked him into some kind of word game or something, but I was just following him to his logical conclusion. 10 years later, I'm at a conference. And I have a guy come up to me, and he says, you know that story you told about the Jehovah's Witness? Yeah. He goes, that was me. Your question didn't save me, but it started me on a quest. It started me thinking and started me researching, and I found out the truth of Jesus. This is what we train you guys to do, to ask the right questions in the right way. It's a great trip. It's 5 days, and you will know more about how to defend your faith than you've ever gotten the opportunity. And you'll do it in real life time, because once you hit college, those professors who are atheists, who want to undermine your faith, they're pros. It's like stepping out of T-ball into a major league pitcher's batter's box. And if you haven't practiced, if you haven't rehearsed, you know, you're mincemeat. That's why we do this. So I hope that you'll think about coming with us. If you want more information, I can give that to you. The cost is relatively low, and we'll have a great time.
So if that's something that you might be interested in, increasing your ability to witness and to defend your faith, we're looking to partner with Lenny and Come Reason Ministries this coming October. So come see myself, come see my wife Julie, any of our volunteer team, and we can get you the information for that. To sign up for it, if you'd like more information sent to you, we can get you that information as well. Let's give it up one more time for Lenny. Thank you so much for coming out.